Before there was land, before there was sky, before the gods themselves had names to answer to, there was only water. Not the kind of water you might picture now. Not a river with banks, not an ocean with shores. This was something far older and far stranger than that. This was the primordial deep, an endless, undivided, unknowable expanse that stretched in every direction without boundary, without sound, without purpose. And dwelling within it, being it, in every meaningful sense, was Tiamat. She is one of the oldest figures in all of recorded mythology, not simply old in the way that many ancient stories are old, but old in the way that precedes the very concept of age. The Babylonians who wrote of her were themselves the inheritors of a tradition stretching back into Sumerian antiquity, and even they spoke of Tiamat as something that had existed before memory could reach. She was not a goddess who rose to power. She was not a spirit who found her domain. She was the domain itself, the salt water, the chaos, the fertile and terrifying darkness from which everything that has ever existed first emerged. Her name, rendered in the ancient Akkadian, carries echoes of the word Tamtu, the sea. But to translate her name simply as sea is to diminish her in a way she does not deserve. Tiamat was not merely a body of water given a face. She was a cosmic principle. She was the embodiment of all that is vast, formless, and untamed. She was the great mother, yes, but she was also the great threat. And for the ancient peoples of Mesopotamia, those two things were never really separate. Picture the world as they understood it, the flat earth resting upon the waters below, the heavens arching above. And at the very foundation of it all, deeper than roots, older than stone, the slow and ceaseless churning of Tiamat's body. She was not worshipped in temples the way other gods were. She was too large for that. She was the condition under which temples became possible at all. In the beginning, the ancient texts tell us, she mingled with Apsu, the freshwater deep, her counterpart, her companion, her equal in antiquity if not in power. Where Tiamat was salt and chaos and the roiling, turbulent sea, Apsu was sweet and still, and the quiet water beneath the earth. Together they moved through one another, their waters intertwined, and from that sacred and primordial mixing, the very first gods were born. Let that settle for a moment. The gods, those figures who would go on to shape the heavens and govern the stars, to bring order to the cosmos and breathe life into human clay. They did not come from some distant paradise. They came from her. They were the children of Tiamat, born from her body, nursed on the dark water of her being. She was not merely their elder, she was their origin. Among the first of her divine offspring were Lamu and Lahamu, ancient and mysterious deities associated with the silt and the mud that formed at the boundary of salt water and fresh. From them came Anshar and Kishar, the horizon of sky and earth. And from those two came Anu, the great sky god. And from Anu in time came Ea, the god of wisdom and water, one of the most powerful and cunning minds in the Babylonian pantheon. Generation after generation, each one more defined, more individual, more ordered than the last, and each one tracing their lineage directly back to the vast and formless body of Tiamat. She was formidable in a way that defies easy comparison. Ancient texts describe her as a dragon, yes, enormous, scaled, terrible. Though to call her simply a dragon is perhaps too small a word. She was a dragoness of the deep, a leviathan older than language, whose body contained within it the template for all monsters yet to come. When the great conflict at the heart of Babylonian mythology finally arrives, when she takes up arms against the younger gods who had disturbed the peace she had given them, she does not face them alone. She births an army from herself. Serpents, dragons, lion demons, storm monsters, and appoints a champion to lead them. The sheer generative power of her being knows no limit. Even in rage, even in war, she is creating. She is disruption and she is creation. She is the mother and she is the monster. She is the first thing and, in a sense, the last. Because even after her defeat, even after the younger gods triumph, even after the cosmos is structured and named and ordered, the world is built from what remains of her body. She never truly ends. She only transforms. And that transformation, how it came about, what it cost, what it made, and what it means, is precisely what we are here to explore. There is a particular quality to the silence that exists before something breaks. Not the silence of emptiness, not the silence of a room with nothing in it, but the silence of fullness, of something held carefully in place. The silence of a world that has not yet decided what it is going to become. That is the silence that hung over the earliest age of Babylonian mythology, and for a time, a long, immeasurable, almost dreamlike span of time, it held. In those first eons, the primordial waters of Tiamat and Apsu moved together in a kind of sacred intimacy that the ancient texts describe with a quietness that feels almost reverent. There was no sky yet, no earth, no boundary between above and below, only the slow, continuous mingling of salt water and sweet, of chaos and stillness, of the vast feminine darkness of Tiamat and the deep, cool, masculine quiet of Apsu. Two forces that should perhaps have been opposites, but were instead, for a time, something closer to partners. The Babylonian creation epic, the Enuma Elish, opens with one of the most beautiful and haunting passages in all of ancient literature. It begins simply with what was not. The heavens above had not yet been named. The earth below had not yet been called into being. Nothing existed but the two great waters, resting together in the deep. And from that resting, from that long and unhurried coexistence, life began to stir. The gods came slowly at first, as they always do in these oldest of stories. The earliest divine beings are less like persons and more like forces, enormous, half-formed, barely distinguishable from the elements that birthed them. Lamu and Lahamu, the first to emerge from the commingling of Tiamat and Apsu's waters, carry names that scholars have long debated but often associate with the silt and sediment that accumulates at the meeting point of two bodies of water. They are the residue of the union. The first solid thing in a universe made entirely of liquid, and already, in that small detail, you can sense the shape of what is coming, the slow, inevitable movement from formlessness toward form, from chaos toward order, from Tiamat's will toward something she did not design and would not choose. After Lamu and Lahamu came Anshar and Kishar, whose names translate, roughly, as the whole of heaven and the whole of earth. These are larger concepts than their parents, more defined, reaching further. The divine family is already expanding outward, already beginning to claim the dimensions of reality as its own. And then from Anshar came Anu, the sky god, majestic and distant, who would come to represent the very canopy of existence. And from Anu came the brilliant, restless, endlessly curious god of wisdom and magic, E, known also as Enki in the older Sumerian tradition. Ea is one of the great figures of Mesopotamian mythology. He is clever in a way that the earlier gods were not, tactical, in a way that suggests the universe is maturing, growing more sophisticated, growing, one might even say, more human in its ambitions and its conflicts. And with the arrival of gods like Ea, something else arrived too, something that the great stillness of the early world was simply not equipped to contain. Noise. This is not a metaphor, or at least it is not only a metaphor. The ancient text is quite specific about it. The younger gods were loud. They were boisterous, energetic, restless in the way that all young things are restless. They moved through the deep in great numbers and with great enthusiasm, and the commotion they created, the disturbance they sent rippling through the primordial waters, was enough to disturb the rest of the two oldest beings in existence. It disturbed Apsu deeply, profoundly. The sweet water deep, that ancient symbol of stillness and the quiet beneath the earth, found that he could not sleep, could not rest. The noise of his divine descendants rang through him constantly, ceaseless and disruptive, and the more he lay there listening to it, the more his stillness curdled into something sharper, something resentful. Now, here is where the story does something extraordinary. Here is where it reveals itself not simply as a creation myth, but as something with genuine psychological sophistication. Because what Apsu does next, what he begins to feel, is deeply, uncomfortably recognizable. He goes to Tiamat. He tells her that he cannot endure it, that the noise and the chaos of the younger gods has made his days intolerable, his rest impossible. And he tells her what he believes the solution must be. They should destroy them, all of them, their own children, their own grandchildren, every divine being that has emerged from their mingled waters. All of it should be unmade, so that the two of them might finally have quiet again. Tiamat refuses. This moment is easy to pass over quickly, but it deserves to be sat with, because Tiamat, at this point in the story, is not the monster. She is not the destroyer. She is, if anything, the voice of restraint, the voice of something that might even be called maternal grief. She rebukes Apsu's proposal with genuine indignation, telling him that what he suggests is wicked, that they should not destroy what they themselves have made. These are their children. These gods, however noisy, however disruptive, are the living expression of everything that passed between the two of them in the ancient deep. You do not unmake your children because they have inconvenienced your sleep. And here we see Tiamat in her fullest early form, not as the raging chaos dragon of the epic's second half, but as something far more complex, as a mother who has brought forth life and feels, with whatever passes for feeling in a being as ancient as she is, a genuine unwillingness to see that life extinguished. She is vast and formless and terrifying, yes. But in this moment, she is also the only adult in the room. Unfortunately, Apsu is not the only one in his camp. His vizier, a minor deity by the name of Mummu, whose name carries connotations of the original formless matter of creation, sides with Apsu enthusiastically. Together, the two of them hatch their plan. And crucially, they do not bring Tiamat along with them. They move without her. They whisper without her. And in doing so, they make the first of the epic's many catastrophic miscalculations. Because among the younger gods, there is Ea, and Ea, as we have already noted, is not simply powerful. He is perceptive. He is the god of wisdom for a reason, and that reason is on full display in what happens next. By methods the text describes with a kind of elegant vagueness, suggesting magical arts, incantations of profound potency. Ea learns of Apsu's plan. He does not panic. He does not raise an alarm and call the gods to battle. Instead, with the quiet confidence of someone who already knows how this ends, he casts a great sleeping spell over Apsu and renders him utterly inert. The god of the primordial sweet waters, the co-creator of the universe, the ancient partner of Tiamat herself, is simply put to sleep and then killed. Ea takes Apsu's dwelling place as his own, building his own home upon and within the body of the defeated ancient. And there, in that claimed space, in the watery house built upon the remains of what was once the stillness beneath the earth, he and his consort Damkina conceive a child of their own. That child is Marduk. But we are not yet ready for Marduk. That name, and everything it carries, belongs to a later chapter. For now, What matters is what Apsu's death does to the one who was not consulted, the one who argued against destruction and was ignored, the one who has now watched her ancient companion, the other half of the primordial deep, the presence she had shared the void with since before time had learned to count itself, be extinguished by the very children she refused to harm. Tiamat's grief does not announce itself loudly. The text gives her a moment of stillness, almost of incomprehension, as though she is too large, too old, too deep for a response to come quickly. But when it comes, it is not grief alone that moves her. It is rage. And the rage of Tiamat is not the rage of a being who has been slighted or humiliated. It is the rage of something cosmological, something elemental. The salt sea disturbed is not a trivial thing. The chaos waters, long patient, long restrained, long willing to share the universe with the orderly and the named. Those waters, once moved to anger, do not calm easily. Around her, other ancient beings begin to murmur, other primordial gods who had watched Apsu fall and found themselves afraid of what the younger generation might do next. They come to Tiamat. They press their case against their divine descendants. They stir the grief into something larger, something organized. She listens. For a long time, she simply listens, and then she begins to gather herself. The mother of the gods, the salt sea, the great and formless deep from which all things came. She is preparing for war. She is about to do the very thing she refused to allow Apsu to do. And the fact that she refused it once, that she argued against it with genuine conviction, does not make her hypocrite. It makes her a being who has been pushed far enough. There is a point beyond which even the oldest patience breaks. Tiamat has reached it. There is a particular kind of transformation that happens not in an instant, but in layers. Not a sudden snapping, not a clean before and after, but a slow accumulation of grief and silence and watching and waiting, until one morning the thing that was patient is patient no longer, and the world around it must reckon with what that patience was holding back. Tiamat's transformation from grieving mother to architect of cosmic war does not happen overnight. The ancient texts give her time. They give her a period of counsel, of listening, of being spoken to by those around her who have their own fears, their own grievances, their own reasons for wanting the younger gods brought low. And that detail matters, because it means that what Tiamat does next is not blind fury. It is not the thrashing of a wounded animal. It is a decision, considered, deliberate, and absolute. The beings who come to her in this period of mourning are themselves ancient, old gods, primordial figures, the kind of divine presences who existed at the margins of the cosmos and had watched the rise of the younger generation with a mixture of unease and resentment. They had seen what happened to Apsu. They had felt the tremor of it, the way an impossibly old thing, extinguished, sends a vibration through everything that shares its age. And they understood, perhaps better than Tiamat did in those first numb moments of loss, what that extinguishing meant for all of them. They press themselves close to her. They speak into the great dark water of her presence. They tell her that what was done to Apsu will be done to her, to all of them, unless something is done in return. They call upon her sorrow. They call upon her power. They call upon the one thing that no younger god, however brilliant, however cunning, however armed with magic and strategic wisdom, could ever truly match. Her sheer, geological, primordial depth. And gradually, in that way that the largest things move, Tiamat begins to turn. What she does next is perhaps the most astonishing display of raw generative power in all of ancient mythology. Faced with an enemy, she does not simply reach for a weapon. She does not call upon existing forces or rally whatever armies might be at hand. She creates, as she has always created, from her own body, from the darkness of the salt water that she is and has always been. She begins to bring forth creatures the likes of which the world has never seen. The list the Enuma Elish gives us is worth dwelling upon, because it is not simply a catalogue of monsters. It is a revelation of Tiamat's interior, a glimpse into what the ancient chaos deep contains when it turns itself inside out and shows the younger world exactly what has been sleeping in its waters all this time. She makes serpents, but not ordinary serpents. These are beings of impossible size, sharp of tooth, relentless of body, filled with venom that the text describes as something close to divine. Their very blood is poison. Their scales are armor. She makes them and looks upon them and pronounces them terrible. And the word the text uses carries a pride in it that is almost parental. She makes them Mushusu, the ferocious dragon, that magnificent scaled creature with the body of a serpent, the forelegs of a lion, the hind legs of an eagle. That would become one of the most enduring images in all of Mesopotamian art. This is the beast that would later guard the gates of Babylon, that would accompany the god Marduk as his sacred animal, and Tiamat makes it first. She is its origin. Even the symbol of her conqueror's power began in her. She makes the Lamu, great hairy heroes, divine warriors of enormous strength, whose name echoes that of the very first divine beings born from her waters in the earliest age. She makes lion monsters and lion dragons, their bodies combining the ferocity of the predator with the cosmic scale of the divine. She makes storm demons, Ugalu, great roaring presences that carry within them the uncontrolled destructive power of weather itself. She makes rabid dogs, enormous and unrelenting. She makes scorpion men, whose upper halves are human and whose lower halves are the most lethal creature the ancient world knew from experience. She makes fishmen. She makes wild rams of supernatural size and aggression. 11 kinds of monsters in total. 11 categories of terror brought up from the deep, shaped by the oldest hands in existence and breathed into terrible life. But an army without a general is only chaos. And Tiamat, for all that she embodies chaos, is thinking with remarkable clarity. She knows that what is coming will require leadership. It will require a mind that can stand against Ea, against Anu, against whatever the younger gods place in opposition to her. She needs a champion. She finds one in Kingu. Kingu is a figure who has attracted less attention than he deserves, perhaps because his story ends badly and history tends to be unkind to those who finish on the losing side. But in this moment, in the warmth of Tiamat's choosing, he is extraordinary. He is a god, ancient, powerful, deeply loyal to Tiamat, and elevated by her selection to a status that makes the rest of the divine world take notice immediately. She does not simply appoint him general. She goes further than that. She places around his neck the Tablet of Destinies, one of the most significant objects in all of Babylonian cosmology. This tablet, inscribed with the fates of gods and mortals alike, is the physical embodiment of divine authority. Whoever holds it holds, in a very real and cosmological sense, the right to rule, the right to decree, the right to determine what is and what shall be. By placing it around Kingu's neck with her own hands, Tiamat is doing something that goes beyond military promotion. She is making him her consort. She is raising him to the position that Apsu once held. She is reconstituting the primordial pair, and this time, she is choosing someone who will not oppose her. She speaks to him with a tenderness that the text renders in remarkable detail for a document describing the preparations for cosmic war. She tells him that his word shall be supreme among the gods, that his command shall be unquestioned, that she has made him great, elevated him above all others, and that together they will do what the primordial order demands of them. Kingu, for his part, receives this with the gravity it deserves. He takes his place at the head of Tiamat's armies, 11 kinds of monsters at his back, the Tablet of Destinies around his neck, the full weight of the oldest power in existence behind him. The younger gods, when word reaches them of what Tiamat is assembling, are not calm about it. The messenger who brings the news to Ea describes the situation with the kind of barely controlled terror that suggests even delivering this information felt dangerous. Tiamat is in open fury. She has made monsters. She has made them godlike and terrible and beyond anything the younger gods have faced before. She has crowned a general. She is moving. Ea, who is not a being who panics easily, goes very quiet at this news. He sits with it the way that genuinely intelligent beings sit with information that reorders their understanding of their situation. And then, methodically, he goes to his own grandfather, Anshar, the great sky horizon, one of the elder divine powers, and reports what he has learned. Anshar's response is visceral. He strikes his thigh, a gesture the ancient texts use to convey distress at the level of the body, not merely the mind, and bites his lip. The image is almost unbearably human for a cosmic deity. The old god, faced with the news that the oldest being in existence has turned her full power against them, for a moment simply does not know what to do. He sends Ea first, the one who defeated Apsu, the one whose cunning is unmatched. Surely, if anyone can calm this, it is him. The instructions are almost touching in their optimism. Go to Tiamat, Anshar says. Try to soothe her. Try to speak to her. Perhaps what was set in motion can still be stopped. E goes. And what happens when he faces the full assembled force of Tiamat's army? The 11 kinds of monsters, the crowned Kingu, the great saltwater chaos being herself, armored now in wrath rather than simply in age, is that he stops. He turns around. Ea, god of wisdom, master of magic, the deity who put Apsu to sleep and built his home upon the result. He looks at what Tiamat has made of herself, and he cannot proceed. The same mind that engineered the death of the primordial sweetwater god finds itself confronted with the primordial saltwater goddess in full war array. Without a next step, he returns to Anshar and reports that he cannot face her. He does not dress this up or soften it. He simply says, I cannot. Anshar sends Anu next. The great sky god, stately and powerful, makes the journey toward Tiamat's forces, with whatever composure a god can maintain while walking toward the edge of everything. He too stops. He too returns. His face, the text tells us, had gone pale. A pale-faced sky god is perhaps the most quietly terrifying image the Enuma Elish offers in its early passages. When the sky itself loses its color at what it has seen, the situation has reached a gravity that ordinary language struggles to contain. The gods convene in their assembly. The noise that once bothered Apsu is gone. They are very, very quiet now. Into that quiet, Anshar speaks a name. It is the name of the god born to Ea and Damkina in the house built upon the sleeping body of Apsu. The young god. The new god. The one who has not yet been tested by anything approaching this scale, but who carries within him something the others do not. A quality that is less about power and more about what power is for. The name he speaks is Marduk. There is a certain kind of person and a certain kind of god who does not rush toward a crisis, not because they are afraid, not because they are calculating in any cold or cynical sense, but because they understand, at some deep and instinctive level, that the moment of stepping forward carries enormous weight, and that weight should be felt before it is assumed. These are the figures who wait in the wings of great stories, not passive, not indifferent, but watchful. Gathering, becoming, quietly and without announcement, exactly what the situation requires. Marduk had been present in the background of these events the entire time, born in the house that Ea built upon the body of Apsu, raised in the deep waters that his father commanded. He had grown into something that the ancient texts struggle, in the most reverent way, to describe adequately. The Enuma Elish lavishes more attention on Marduk's physical and divine qualities than on almost any other single subject in its verses, and even then, the language strains at its own edges, reaching for superlatives that feel barely sufficient. He had 4 eyes, the text tells us, 4 ears. When his lips moved, fire came forth. His stature was immense, taller, larger, more radiant than any of the gods who came before him, as though all the accumulated power of his lineage had concentrated itself, distilled and refined across the generations into this single figure. Anshar, looking upon him as a child, had called him the son of the gods. Anu, his great-grandfather, had fashioned winds for him as playthings, actual winds given to a divine child to sport with, and Marduk had delighted in them, raising waves and storms in the deep simply for the joy of it. This detail is quietly important. Marduk at play disturbed the older beings in the deep. His mere amusement sent turbulence through the ancient waters. This is not a god who needs to try in order to affect the world around him. His natural state, his resting presence, already reshapes reality in his vicinity. What he might accomplish when he actually applies himself is a question that hangs over his early mythology with a very specific kind of anticipation. So when Anshar, in the desperate quiet of the divine assembly, speaks his name, when the gathered gods turn toward the idea of Marduk, the way that people in a dark room turn toward the first suggestion of light, it is not an act of desperation alone, it is recognition. The senior gods know what they have in him. They have always known. They have simply never needed it at this scale before. Anshar sends his chamberlain, Gaga, to find Marduk and bring him to the assembly. The message he carries is careful, almost diplomatic in its construction. Anshar wishes to present the situation to Marduk fully, honestly, without minimizing what Tiamat has become or what her army represents. There is no attempt to make this sound manageable, no reassurance that it will be straightforward. The ancient king of the divine horizon tells his chamberlain to tell the truth, and the truth is that they are facing something none of them have been able to stand before, and they need him. Marduk comes, and here is where the story reveals something about his character that is easy to admire and perhaps equally easy to find unsettling, depending on your perspective. Because Marduk, upon hearing what is being asked of him, does not immediately say yes. He does not rise to his full radiant height and declare himself ready and demand to know where the battle is. He listens, he considers, and then he speaks his terms. If I am to be your champion, he says, if I am to go out against Tiamat and defeat what she has made of herself and her armies, then when I return victorious, my word shall be supreme. Whatever I decree shall be unalterable. Whatever I create shall endure. The assembly of gods shall convene at my command, and the power to determine destinies, the highest power in the cosmos, shall rest with me. He is asking for everything. He is asking for what Tiamat tried to give Kingu by placing the Tablet of Destinies around his neck. But he is asking for it legitimately, contractually, from the assembled divine authority of the younger gods themselves. He is asking them to agree, before the battle is fought, that the world after the battle will be his, in a way that the world before it never was. This is either the boldness of someone who knows exactly what they are worth, or it is the instinct of a genuinely great strategic mind, someone who understands that military victory without political settlement is just the beginning of a longer problem. Perhaps it is both. The ancient text does not editorialize. It simply records what he asks and what happens next. What happens next is that the gods, faced with this demand, agree without notable hesitation. They prepare a great feast. Because the Babylonians understood, with a wisdom that feels very human, that certain decisions deserve ceremony, deserve the weight of gathered bodies and shared food and the solemnity of ritual before they are made final. They eat and they drink, these gods who have been pale with fear and silent with dread, and the food and wine warm something in them, and they look at Marduk, and they see in him what Anshar saw when he called him the son of the gods, and one by one they give him what he has asked for. They give him the kingship. But before he goes to war, they test the gift they have given him. They place a constellation, a single star, a piece of the fabric of the sky, in their midst, and they ask Marduk to demonstrate the authority they have granted. Destroy it, they say. Then restore it. Marduk speaks a word. The constellation is gone. He speaks again. It returns unaltered. The assembly erupts. The gods who had been still and frightened find their voices again, find their certainty, find the particular exhilaration that comes from having chosen correctly. They proclaim him king. They give him the weapons he will need, not the weapons of ordinary war, but the instruments of cosmic authority. A great net given by his grandfather Anu, with which to envelop Tiamat entire. The winds, those same winds he played with as a child, gathered now in their totality and placed at his command. The 4 winds, the 7 winds, the whirlwind, the tornado, winds that could fill a body and hold it open, that could enter through one end of a vast thing and pin it in place while something sharper followed. And then his own weapon, the one the text lingers on with particular reverence. A great spear, a lightning bolt in some readings, a mace in others. The specific physics of it somewhat less important than the quality of inevitability the text gives it. This is the weapon that ends things, the weapon made specifically for what is coming. He mounts his storm chariot, 4 horses draw it, horses with names that mean destroyer and ferocious and trampler and swift. And even the horses are weapons, even the means of his travel is an instrument of the force he now carries. He takes up his net. He calls his winds around him. He moves. The god Anu has also given him something less tangible but perhaps more important than any of the physical weapons. He has given him the lightning flash, the glare, the quality of his presence that moves ahead of him like a herald, that hits whatever stands before him before any physical thing arrives. Marduk in full war array does not simply approach. He arrives in layers, the light and the terror first, then the wind, then the weapons, then the god himself at the center of all of it. When he reaches Tiamat's forces, there is a moment, and this moment is given to us slowly, with great deliberateness, in which the 2 of them simply see each other. Kingu and the 11 monsters fall back, not in cowardice, in something more like awe or its darker cousin, the general that Tiamat crowned with a tablet of destinies, the champion she elevated to the position of her consort and the leader of her armies. He looks at what is coming and he cannot hold his formation. The monsters that Tiamat made from her own body, the serpents and the dragons and the lion demons and the scorpion men. They are afraid. The text gives them that dignity. They are genuinely afraid, but Tiamat is not. She stands. She receives his full approach without flinching, and in this moment she is, whatever else she is, magnificent. The ancient chaos deep, the saltwater mother, the being that preceded all naming and all order. She does not step back. She raises her voice. She cries out at him, calls his advance treacherous, calls the gathering of the gods against her a betrayal, and in her words, there is genuine grief still threaded through the rage. She speaks as someone who remembers when these gods were children, when they were hers. Marduk does not let her finish. He is not cruel in this, he is simply decisive. He speaks his own challenge, tells her that she has set herself above the gods who are her children, and that this day will determine what the cosmos becomes. And then the first god in existence who was not afraid of her opens his great net. And Tiamat, at last, is caught in something she did not make. There is a question that sits quietly beneath every creation myth ever told. Not the question of how the world was made, though that is the question such stories appear to be answering. The deeper question, the one that creation myths are actually wrestling with, is this: what did the world cost? Every tradition that has tried to explain the existence of everything has understood, at some instinctive level, that something does not come from nothing, that order does not emerge from chaos without a reckoning, that the structured, navigable, nameable world we inhabit required something to be given up, broken apart, transformed beyond recognition. The Babylonians were simply more specific about what that something was, more honest perhaps about the scale of what creation demanded. It demanded Tiamat. The battle, when it comes, is swift in the way that the most consequential things often are, not swift as in trivial, but swift as in the way that attention built across an enormous span of time can release itself in a moment so concentrated and final that the whole weight of what preceded it is felt in the single instant of its resolution. The Enuma Elish has been building toward this confrontation since its opening lines. The actual collision, when it arrives, is almost shockingly immediate. Marduk spreads his great net, the net given to him by Anu, vast enough to envelop a being made of oceans, and casts it over Tiamat. She opens her mouth to swallow him, to take him into herself, as she has taken everything into herself since before time had a name, and Marduk drives the evil wind, the Imhalu, the wind that serves no weather but destruction, directly into that open mouth. She cannot close it. The wind fills her. Her body distends, held open from within, pinned by the very air that her enemy commands, and in that moment of impossible vulnerability, the oldest being in existence, helpless against something as simple and as terrible as a wind that will not stop, Marduk drives his spear. It enters her body, it splits her down the center, it kills her. The text does not pause here, it does not mourn. It moves forward with the same relentless momentum as the winds Marduk wielded. And what it describes next is the thing that makes this story not merely a tale of divine warfare, but one of the most consequential cosmological documents in human history. Marduk stands over the body of Tiamat, and he looks at her, and he begins to think. He splits her body in two. The gesture is described with almost architectural precision, as though he is less a warrior surveying a battlefield and more an engineer surveying a material he intends to use. He takes one half of her and raises it up, stretching it above him, and from it he makes the sky, the vault of the heavens, the great ceiling of the world, the blue expanse that every human being who has ever existed has looked up into with wonder. It is the upper half of Tiamat's body. He stations guards along its edges so that her waters do not escape, so that the sky does not leak back into the chaos it came from. The other half he lays beneath him, and from it he makes the earth, the ground that every living thing has ever walked upon, the soil that has received every seed and every body since the beginning of agriculture and the beginning of death. It is the lower half of Tiamat's body, the same body that birthed the gods, the same body that birthed the monsters, pressed flat and made solid and given over to the purposes of a cosmos that she never intended and could not have imagined. He makes her eyes into the sources of the Tigris and the Euphrates, those two rivers that were not incidental to Babylonian civilization, but were its literal foundation. The reason cities existed where they existed, the reason agriculture was possible, the reason any of this story was being told by anyone at all. Her eyes weep the rivers. The water that flows through the heartland of Mesopotamia is, in the Babylonian understanding, the tears and the substance of the oldest being who ever existed. Every time a farmer in ancient Babylon led water from the Tigris to his fields, he was drawing from Tiamat's body. Every time a city on the Euphrates drank, it was drinking her. Her tail he bends up into the sky, and fastens there to make the Milky Way, that great sweep of stars across the night sky, the river of light that ancient peoples everywhere found both beautiful and mysterious. It is her tale. The body of the Chaos Dragon, even in defeat, even divided and repurposed, still stretches across the entire visible universe. From her breasts he makes mountains, from her spittle he makes clouds and wind and rain and mist. From the poison that was in her body, that divine venom, the text described when introducing her monsters, he makes the things that drift through weather and atmosphere, the substances that are neither earth nor sky, but live in the boundary between them. He builds a great structure in the heavens, the Ishara, the celestial counterpart to the temples on earth. He marks out the stations of the stars. He establishes the year, dividing it into its 12 months, assigning 3 stars to each. He makes the moon and charges it with governing the calendar, marking the passage of time by its waxing and waning. He makes the dawn. He makes the dusk. He marks the point at which each day begins and the point at which it ends. He is not simply winning a war. He is building a world. Every gesture is both a military victory and an act of creation, and the two things are completely inseparable. The order that Marduk imposes is inseparable from the chaos that Tiamat was, because the order is literally built from her substance. There is no sky that is not her. There is no earth that is not her. There is no river, no star, no cloud, no mountain that does not carry within it the physical matter of the primordial saltwater deep. The Babylonians knew what they were saying when they told this story. They were saying that the world is not separate from chaos. It is chaos, organized. That order and disorder are not opposites, but phases of the same substance. That the terrifying deep that existed before everything exists still, held in place, held in shape, but present, always present, in every river and every storm and every mountain range, in the sky above your head and the ground beneath your feet. Tiamat did not simply die. She became everything. When the great work of cosmic construction is settled, Marduk turns to the matter of what comes next. The gods, freed from the threat that had paralyzed them, reassemble. They are grateful. They are exuberant. They begin to speak of building Marduk a great temple, a home worthy of his kingship, a place where they might gather and perform the rituals that give structure to divine life, the way Marduk's great constructions have given structure to the physical cosmos. But Marduk has one more act of creation to perform, and it is perhaps the most intimate one of all. He asks the assembled gods a question. Who, he says, incited Tiamat to war? Who was the one who stirred her grief and her fury into something organized and martial and directed? Who caused this conflict that required all of this destruction to resolve? The gods answer without hesitation. They name Kingu, the general, the consort, the god who wore the tablet of destinies around his neck and led the 11 monsters into a battle they did not win. Kingu, who was elevated beyond his station by Tiamat's grief-stricken love and her desire to reconstitute what she had lost in Apsu. Kingu is brought forward. The tablet of destinies is removed from his neck and given to Marduk, its rightful and contractually established holder, and Kingu himself, defeated, diminished, stripped of everything that Tiamat's choosing had given him, is killed. From his blood, Ea creates humanity. This too deserves to be sat with. The Babylonians, in this extraordinary passage, are making a statement about human nature that is as psychologically sophisticated as anything in their mythology. We are made from the blood of the instigator, from the substance of the god who whispered into Tiamat's grief and shaped it into war. We carry within us, literally and cosmologically, the material of the being who caused the conflict that made the world. We are not made from divine triumph. We are not made from Marduk's victory or Ea's wisdom or Anu's authority. We are made from the loser, from the one who was used and elevated and ultimately destroyed, from the blood of Kingu, which itself was shaped by Tiamat, which itself came from the same primordial waters that everything came from. Humanity takes its first breath. The gods are assigned their stations. The great temple Esagila is built in Babylon, gleaming and enormous. A terrestrial mirror of the celestial structures Marduk established in the heavens. The divine assembly meets within it. Marduk's 50 names are recited, each name a facet of his power, each name a lesson in what it means to be the supreme god of a cosmos built on the remains of the oldest power that ever existed. And then the great Babylonian epic draws itself toward its close. The cosmos is ordered. Humanity exists to serve the gods and relieve them of the labor of maintaining the world. The calendar turns. The rivers run. The stars move in their appointed courses. Everything is in its place. And beneath it all, beneath the earth that was her body, beneath the sky that was her body, beneath the rivers that were her eyes, and the mountains that were her breasts, and the Milky Way that was her tail, Tiamat rests, changed, distributed, present in every particle of the physical universe, but resting. Every great story leaves a residue, not simply in the cultures that first told it, but in the ones that came after, in the traditions that absorbed it without always knowing they were absorbing it, in the images that recur across centuries and continents with a consistency too precise to be coincidence, in the dreams and the fears and the creative impulses of people who have never heard the name Tiamat, and yet are, in ways they would find surprising, still living inside her story. She is, in the most literal scholarly sense, one of the most influential figures in the history of mythology, not because her story was widely read. For most of human history, the Enuma Elish lay buried in the ruins of Nineveh, its cuneiform tablets broken and scattered and silent beneath centuries of accumulated earth. But because the story itself, or something very close to its bones, traveled, it moved through trade and conquest and cultural exchange, through the long, slow osmosis by which ideas cross borders without passports, and it left its mark on traditions that would shape the world far more broadly than Babylon ever did. The Hebrew Bible's opening verses, those spare, magnificent words that describe the beginning of creation, carry within them faint but unmistakable echoes of Tiamat's world. The Hebrew word tehom, used to describe the deep that existed before creation, before light, before the dividing of waters above and waters below. It is linguistically related to Tiamat's name, the same root, the same ancient resonance. When Genesis describes the Spirit of God moving over the face of the deep, it is moving over something whose name, in an earlier language, belonged to her, the waters that God divides to make the sky and the earth. Scholars have long noted the structural similarity to what Marduk does with Tiamat's body. The gestures are different. The theology is profoundly different. But the deep is the same deep. The chaos that precedes order is the same chaos. This is not to diminish either tradition. It is to recognize something remarkable about the human imagination, that across different cultures, different languages, different centuries, the same intuition recurs, that the world came from something formless and vast and watery. That order required a reckoning with that formlessness, that creation and conflict are, at some fundamental level, the same event. The ancient Greeks knew Tiamat too, though they called her by other names and reshaped her story through their own sensibilities. Tiamat's lineage of chaos water monsters finds clear relatives in the great serpentine figures of Greek mythology. In Typhon, the enormous dragon serpent that Zeus must defeat before he can establish his rule over the cosmos. The structure is the same, the young chief god, the older chaos monster, the battle that determines the shape of the world. Scholars of comparative mythology call this the Chaos Kampf, the chaos battle, and they find it across an astonishing range of cultures, from Mesopotamia to Greece to the Norse tradition to the Vedic myths of ancient India, where the storm god Indra defeats the great serpent, Vritra, and releases the waters of the world. Tiamat may not be the origin of all of them, but she is the oldest version we have written down, the earliest surviving account of the story that humanity has apparently needed to tell itself in one form or another, since it first began telling stories at all. She persisted through the centuries in subtler ways too. In the medieval European imagination, the great sea dragon, the leviathan of the deep, the serpent that dwells in the formless waters at the edge of the known world, never entirely disappeared. It shifted and transformed, acquired new theological meanings, became a symbol of evil in traditions that would not have recognized Babylon. But the image endured, the enormous female serpent of the primordial deep, the monster that must be defeated for order to prevail. She kept surfacing. She kept returning, as though the story had its own momentum, independent of any single culture's willingness to carry it. In the modern world, Tiamat has found new life with a vitality that might have surprised the scribes who first pressed her story into clay. She appears in fantasy literature, in role-playing games, in films and comics and digital worlds, often as a dragon of enormous power, often as a figure of chaos and creation simultaneously, often as female and ancient and formidable, in a way that no simple villain quite captures. These modern versions rarely know the full depth of her original story, but they have, in their own way, intuited something true about her. They have kept the essential quality intact, the sense of something vast and old and generative, something that cannot be reduced to mere evil, something that was the beginning before the beginning and that persists in some form in everything that came after. That persistence is perhaps the most honest tribute the story could receive, because what the Enuma Elish is telling us, beneath all the divine warfare and the cosmic construction and the making of monsters and the splitting of bodies, what it is really telling us is that the world is not separate from its origins, that the chaos is not defeated, not truly, not finally. It is incorporated. It is held within the structure of everything that calls itself ordered. The rivers run with it, the sky arches with it, the ground holds it, and occasionally, in the way that the deep occasionally reasserts itself, in storms and floods and earthquakes and the great unpredictable upheavals of the natural world. Tiamat reminds us that she is still here, not as a defeated enemy, as the substance of existence itself. She was the first. She is, in every material sense, still everywhere, and the story of her life and her transformation and her endurance has been flowing through human imagination for longer than most of what we call civilization has existed. Some waters, it turns out, do not still. They simply wait for someone to listen.